is by having this mantra. Most of my life, I was particularly terrified of speaking up because I had a speech impediment, which made it difficult to pronounce certain letters, sounds, and I felt like I was fine writing on the page, but once I got on stage, I was worried my words might jumble and stumble. What was the point in trying not to mumble these thoughts in my head if everything's already been said before? But finally, I had a moment of realization where I thought, if I choose not to speak out of fear, then there's no one that my silence is standing for. And so I came to realize that I cannot stand standing to the side, standing silent. I must find the strength to speak up. And one of the ways I do that is through this mantra where I call back to what I call honorary ancestors. These are people who might not be related to you by blood or by birth, but who are more than worth saying their names because you stand on their shoulders all the same. And it's only from the height of these shoulders that we might have the sight to see the mighty power of poetry, the power of language made accessible, expressible. Poetry is interesting because not everyone is going to become a great poet.
To then becoming a spoken word poet and having to say those poems out loud.
Right. For me, it's always, not only the question of, is what I'm writing as powerful as it can be? And then there's also the question of, how am I going to physically perform this as someone who still to this day struggles heavily with sound and with enunciation? And for me, it was a lot of practice makes perfect. Part of that included the flashcards of practicing words, but also, interestingly enough, something that I do sometimes to help me with my speech impediment is I will watch and listen to other great orators and try to embody them.
Like who?
Like Barack Obama, who's great. Martin Luther King, I'll watch his speeches because he's a phenomenal orator. But even like the cast of Hamilton, there's so many R's in that. Aaron Burr, sir. And so I'll practice that song before a performance, and it really helps me work on what I need to work on.
The privilege you're surrounded by, but also the privilege that you yourself now have.
Right. I think for a lot of students at Harvard, and I will just speak for myself, you arrive and all of a sudden you are bestowed with a type of privilege that people around the world, would give so much for. I remember a distinct memory when I was walking past Widener Hall Library, which is this gorgeous library, and I was just seeing all of these tourists with their faces pressed against the glass. And it was this moment of, I'm the one behind the glass. I'm the one with the power that this line of children visiting want to have access to. And for me, it was a question of, now that I'm here, now that I have this access, what am I going to do with it? And for me, it doesn't just stop at my own education or my own degree. It's taking the historical legacy of Harvard and what it represents and the type of power that it holds, and then translating that into my own work as an activist and a writer.
That motivate you? It's the text, the words that you come across.
Right. To me, words matter, and I think that's kind of what made this inauguration that much more sentimental and special. We've seen over the past few years the ways in which the power of words has been violated and misappropriated. And what I wanted to do is to kind of reclaim poetry as that site in which we can re-purify, re-sanctify not only the Capitol building, which we saw violated, but the power of words, and to invest that in kind of the highest office of the land. Perfect at this, I am not balancing all the time, but what I think really helps me is being really explicit about what I want to contribute out of my life. And that means writing it down, reciting it to myself. So if I know that what matters to me is family, my friends, my education, but also being, a specific voice in this specific field, all of a sudden managing my time becomes so much easier, because rather than having everyone else decide what's important to me, I'm telling them, I'm vocalizing it. For example, even with pitching this book, every single meeting that I sat down and I was like, great, that's how much you want to offer. How much are we giving back to First Book? How much could we give then to this type of program that would do this with books? And because I walk into my life, my meetings, the bus, my classes, already with those aims explicitly inscribed on my head, it becomes so much harder kind of for the chaos of politics and just daily life to knock those down. So I think any way that you can write down, whether it's on your wall, on your phone, whatever, what really matters to you, to the boiled down dregs of the hot bottled tea of your life, what are the 5 ingredients?
You know, when they're like gluten-free, water-free, whatever, like what are you free of in your life and what are the ingredients that you have? Write it down and also tell your friends, because my friends are really good. I have my friend right there, Aspen, who's gonna hate me for pointing her out. Hey, who are really good at like reminding me, you know, oh, you know, that really sounds like you or something that you would do or something you wouldn't do. Thank you. But sure, we can do this. And so those are some great highlights. But for me, the moments that keep me going, the moments that rejuvenate me and why I do my work is kind of like a lot of the moments I think all of us have talked about on the panel. It's that person who comes up to you after the performance or after the reading and tells you their story. And I mean, one of the things that I continually deal with is growing up having a speech impediment and it coming back in moments when I'm most nervous. So you can imagine going live on MTV. It's kind of a moment when I'm a bit nervous about what I'm about to do and, you know, trying to make decisions of how I want to navigate that. Do I want to change the way I speak? Do I want to change the way in which I present myself? And when I was named U.S. Youth Poet Laureate, I made a conscious decision to not erase those scars of myself and to not erase that process that I've had of dealing with an auditory processing disorder, of dealing with a speech impediment while being a speaker that travels around the country. And time again, I will get on stage and tell my story, and especially that I remember that first night when I was named U.S. Youth Poet Laureate at Gracie Mansion. There was a girl that came up to me with her mom, and she was like 6 years old, and she has these big brown eyes, and she starts talking to me about how she has that same exact auditory processing disorder that I have and a speech impediment, but because of me, she's inspired to write and share her voice. And I don't think highlights get better than that. I really don't. And it's not that I'm trying to convert people to poets. I'm not trying to make all the little children that I meet with become published authors. Like, that's not my duty, but my duty is to make them believe in themselves. And that has been the greatest highlight that I think I'll ever have in this position. Also, it's going to be live on TV and just barf. Let's see. Harvard has been very interesting, and I'll say something that I had to approach when I arrived there. You know, you go to Harvard, and the things that people used to describe is it's a lot of sharks who are used to being the biggest fish in the pond, and all of a sudden they're in the ocean, and you're like, whoa. You know, there's a giant squid over there who like published 8 books, you know, fixing cancer and like all of these other things. And, you know, I think especially when you're a woman, especially if you're a person of color, et cetera, you step into that type of Ivy League environment and you go, you know, oh, what an honor for me to be here at Harvard. And it kind of in my second year in, I started thinking, what an honor for Harvard for me to be here. And I don't say that with pretentiousness, I don't say that with ego, but it's me really owning up to the history and the legacy of the institutions that I've been lucky enough to have a key into. Now that I'm in, I kind of think of myself in some ways as Odysseus, like I'm in the Trojan horse. I'm like, yeah, hey guys, and then I'm like gonna dismantle it from the inside. So I think, you know, I came to Harvard coming from a background in LA with my school teachers who really taught me to think critically, think outside the box. And so I'm still very much that same person, but it's more so treating my own personal journey in itself as one of the first, I think, battlegrounds of the justice that I think needs to come from higher education.